Find a nice comfy seat. Just settle in. Let your physical body align into a position of ease. And then see if you can let your respiratory body follow that ease. And then see if you can start to intertwine the ease between your physical body, your respiration, the confines of your mat. There's this yogi who's been struggling a bit. Feels like she's constantly trying to catch up in life and easily caught off guard by unexpected events, unforeseen challenges. Let's give ourselves just 30 more seconds here just to feel into this level of grounding. And when it feels appropriate for you, we'll let the eyes open if they happen to be closed. And let's take our arms out towards cactus for a moment. And spread the hands out nice and wide. And just really think about the elbows and shoulders being equally aligned. And just hold the hands wide and feel any tautness across the shoulder girdle. And then start to lower the palms towards the floor without letting the elbows drop. So try to keep the elbows at shoulder height until the palms face towards the floor or as close as you can get with this internal rotation. And then let's inhale and take both fingers or both hands up towards the ceiling. And then we'll exhale and let the palms come down towards the floor. And inhale back up. And let's do that one more time. Try to keep those elbows nice and high. Hard to do. And then relax the hands down to rest. Wherever that is, they're going to be palms up or palms down, but let the hands rest and feel the shoulder girdle once again. And just try to see if you can draw some breath up into the underneath the collarbone and expand the lungs. And then let's take our arms out wide, palms down. So thumbs are facing forward here. And then with an exhale, just roll the palms so that they face up. Thumbs face towards the back of the room. And then inhale back to that, palms down. Exhale, we roll up. And inhale, palms down. And just move a couple more times with your breath. And when you feel like you're complete, whenever that happens to be, let's just release the hands once again. And once again, just allow the awareness to drift across the shoulder girdle. Try to feel some space there and try to draw breath up into that space. Remember that we kind of use our breath as a way to fully capture space we create. And then when it feels appropriate, we're going to take our elbows up. You can take the arms out and then just go fingers down, trying to keep the elbows still roughly at shoulder height. And then we're going to inhale till the palms face the floor, and then exhale down. And let's just do that a couple of times. Really trying to keep those elbows high is probably one of the more challenging aspects of this, aside from the internal rotation, which can be pretty challenging in itself. And one more time, just letting the arms come down, bringing your hands back up, and then releasing. And one more time, feeling that space across the shoulder girdle there. And let's transition to a quick little hands and knees tabletop. Just feel your body as you set up here. Splay the fingers out wide. Try to really pay attention to that connection that the arm structure is making into the shoulder socket, and broaden out across the collarbones. Almost imagine that you're pushing the sternum straight forward and you're rolling the tops of the shoulders straight back, and see if you can get this big bowing sensation across the shoulder girdle that captures some of this anterior belly tissue. And then see if you can hold that activity in your belly as you curl your toes and just roll back into a nice little down dog. And just explore this a little bit. Let your heels pedal out. When it feels complete for you, when you feel like you've had enough, let's come down to hands and knees tabletop. We'll flip the tops of the feet and sink our way back into child's pose. Land your way back into that shape. No rush to get there. And then as you land in child's pose, just make a determination what's best for your shoulders. If it's accessible to you, if it would feel good to you, you have the capacity to clasp the hands behind you here and really continue that lateral expansion of the humeral heads, broadening out the collarbone structure. There's a couple of things that may make that not the right thing for you. If you have a lot of neck sensitivity, that can put some more pressure on the forehead, which ends up pressure at the cervical spine. And you also the shoulders may have enough restriction that also doesn't feel good. Remember, you could clasp the hands around the feet, or you could leave the hands in front of you or underneath the forehead. Just determining what's best for the body here. And we'll give ourselves just about 20 more seconds just to experience this first child's pose. And when it feels appropriate for you, let's pull ourselves back to tabletop and just exhale out, round the middle of the spine, tuck the chin, tuck the tailbone, get that flexion articulation. And then once you get into the top of your cat shape, start to roll this back and forth. You can kind of imagine, it doesn't exactly work this way, right? But you can kind of imagine that the flexion apex is rolling through your spine. Like you're pushing it from the midpoint down towards the lumbar and up towards the thoracic spine. In some ways, that's true. Where we put the weight really does shift the pressure point in the flexion. That doesn't necessarily change that apex joint, but just a little rock back and forth in this full arch. And then when you feel like you've had enough, roll back to neutral and then sink back into child's pose once again. And think of this child's pose a little bit different than the last one. Last one, we were very shoulder centric. Think about this as a spinal reset so that the spinal column is just allowed to kind of naturally integrate into your release. So the goal is a full, deep decompression through the impact of your exhale. Let's again just give ourselves 20 more seconds here just to feel our body fully and completely relax. And when it feels appropriate for you, whenever that is true, let's pull ourselves back to tabletop. And we're going to create our cow, our extension articulation. So belly drops, tailbone lifts, chin lifts. And then we're going to rock back and forth again. A little bit more tenderness likely here. The lumbar compression can be more intense. So just be really delicate in the way you're moving. You also may notice that you capture a lot of this anterior musculature. Very rare that we go into this deep of an extension. And then when we do go into this deep of an extension, exceptionally rare that we're moving. So you may notice that there's some musculature that just doesn't get a lot of activity here, especially around that solar plex and diaphragm region. Really nice to give some space to the musculature around the diaphragm. And a really nice way, give some capacity for respiration. When you feel like you've had enough, when you feel like you're balanced, let's bring our spine back to neutral, and one more time, sink into child's pose. And this time, you may notice a lot more anterior awareness. You may not, but if you notice a lot more anterior awareness, just because we've got into some space that we don't necessarily frequently get into, make a choice whether it be advantageous to continue to expand the anterior with some shoulder work or to continue to relax the spine into more of that natural settling. And we'll just let our body respirate here. We'll give ourselves 20 seconds. See if you can feel a little of the psoas release as it has this attachment kind of at diaphragm level on the back of the body. And then when it feels appropriate for you, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop, and we'll extend our legs straight out in front of us for a little staff. Now you have your blankets here. If you'd like to use them, we can go shelf fold, hot dog fold, shelf fold, hot dog fold. So you end up with kind of a bolster-like approximation, and that can slide right underneath the knees. We're going to take a nice traditional seated forward fold. You do not have to use the props, but if you want to find a little softness in the posterior chain, nice opportunity to do so. And then we'll just settle right in to a fold. We were in a down dog, right? So we got a little posterior chain activation, but a lot of the expansiveness has been pretty anterior focused, a quarter of the way through practice. And so now asking for this big posterior chain room can feel a little sticky. See if you can transition some of this anterior space around the shoulder girdle, around the diaphragm, into the posterior chain by relaxing into the shape. Instead of thinking about getting more depth, think about giving more depth. With each exhale. So this yogi, she's riding her bike home from a practice. And she's about halfway between her house and the practice location. And she hears this really horrible sound of metal grinding against concrete. And she goes to take a forward pedal, and it's like her foot ran into a concrete block. She hops off her bike, and the back tire is flat. And she goes into her little bike bag and she rustles around, and she doesn't have she has a tube, but for some reason, her little mini bike pump isn't in the bag. And she just melts down in this moment on the side of the street. Tears are pouring off her face and splashing on the concrete of the bike path. She picks up her bike, puts it on her shoulder, and walks it home. And it's painful. The way the bike rests on her shoulder is digging into her as she carries. It's a light bike, but it's about 1.5 miles of carrying this thing on her shoulder. And when she gets home, she puts her bike down, she goes into her room, she turns off all the lights, and the tears that were happening on the side of the road look like nothing compared to what happens in her room in the dark. A couple hours later, she emerges from this dark room and she makes a promise to herself that this isn't how she wants to do things. And so she's going to make a change. We'll give ourselves about another 60 seconds here. Remember, try to, instead of creating more space, try to give more space by just relaxing into the openness you've created. And when it feels appropriate for you, as it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our spine back to vertical. Try to feel the unwinding and the restacking of the spinal column here. And then let's take both of our blankets here. We're going to make a T behind us. So one blanket across the mat at head level and one blanket the same direction as the mat traveling the spine. And let's just land your sacrum on the mat and then slowly lower yourself down here. Couple of choices as you get landed. If having the head at an equal level doesn't feel good for the neck, you can slide that head blanket to either roll or place on top of your mat length blanket, depending on the geometry of your torso. One of those will make more sense to you. But make sure that you feel grounded in the sacrum. and supported in the head and neck. And then just let your palms roll up. Legs can be bent or extended. Bottoms of the feet could be together, but we are going to have some time with the bottoms of the feet together. So just a heads up, if that is something you want to work in, we will get there. And then try to relax in a way where the corners of your shoulders can continue to relax down, where you can continue to get this broadness from the sternum towards the lateral edges of the body. And then make the determination of where to best suit your legs. And by that, I mean the direction of internal, external, or neutral rotation. So toes pointed straight up brings the femurs into this neutral lock-in, puts the hips in a neutral lock-in, and allows for a little more openness across the hip girdle. But external rotation, let the toes fall out a bit, puts a little more arch into the lumbar, softens that curvature just a little bit. And then it's possible that you fall more naturally towards the internal rotation too, which spaces out the sacrum a bit and creates some width from the backside across your hip girdle. So think about the foot positioning kind of as the last little tweak before you fully relax into this shape. And then let's just once again give space by relaxing with each exhale respiration. And so this yogi starts making some calls, and she ends up getting referred to this old guru who lives out by the river. She's never heard of this guy, but 3 or 4 of her friends all mention this same person, and she's like, well, that is who it's got to be. And so the next morning she wakes up, she fixes her bike tire. She jumps on her bike and she rides out to where this guru is supposed to live. And she pulls up, and almost like he's waiting for her, he greets her as she arrives, welcomes her in. And the warmth with which he receives her causes her to start tearing up again in a way that she was not expecting. And he comforts her and says, it's okay. It's okay. What brought you here today? We'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. And she starts to share the story of the bike breaking down. And she gets all the way through that, and she's talking about how she's crying, and this guru is kind of looking at her. He eventually says, well, I'm not very mechanical. I'm not sure I could fix your bike tire. When it feels appropriate, let's bend our knees if they're not already bent. And we'll just roll off of our prop one direction or the other, whatever side feels most comfortable for you. And we can just pull both of those props off of our mat for the moment. Keep them handy. And then let's roll back onto our spine. And let the knees start to dynamically rotate here. So just a little exploration of lumbar capacity. And we really want to find out what is within our comfort capacity on these rotations. We are going to have a static twist to both sides. So we just want to know where we're comfortable and if a prop is the appropriate piece here. Eventually, we're going to let the knees fall to the right. And if you determine that having a prop would be advantageous, you can take one of these blankets and just place it at the appropriate depth for you so that you can be grounded and at ease here. And then we're going to take our left arm and bend the elbow 90 degrees so the fingertips point towards the ceiling, and then release the palm down towards the floor. If the palm doesn't make it to the floor, we have this second blanket, which can be made into a block or any other less dense shapes that can support the arm. So we want to have a nice internal rotation that is supported. So either the floor or a blanket prop or towel prop. And we just have a twist of the knees to the right and an internal rotation of the arm to the left arm. The right arm can be in external rotation. The palm can be up, 90-degree bend of the elbow, fingers facing towards the space behind you, but it doesn't need to be. It could be down by your side or it could be out at T, whatever feels most appropriate for you. And then once again, we're just relaxing so that we can give space here. And so she says, no, I already fixed my bike. Look, it's right here. What I need from you, what I want from you, is I want you to build my endurance. And he's like looking at her like, I'm a 90-year-old man. I don't know if I'm the endurance trainer you need. And she immediately picks up on that look and she says, no, not like that. Like, I want to be able to handle all of the hardships that I will face for the rest of my life. And this old guru, he kind of like clicks, his eyes light up. There's a sparkle to him. He says, this I can help you with. You want to be strong enough, resilient enough, so that you can withstand the hardships that you will face for the rest of your life. She says, yes, that's right. And he says, okay. Do you see over on that table, there's that huge metal basket? She says, yeah. He says, and next to it, do you see that there's that hourglass? She says, yeah. He says, okay. I want you to turn that hourglass over, and I need you to run down to the river and pull stones. And I need you to pull a stone for every hardship you expect to face for the rest of your life. And then you will put them in that metal basket. And before that hourglass, the last sand in that hourglass runs out, you need to lift the basket, holding all of the weight of every hardship you will ever face. He says there's an hour of sand in that hourglass, and it will start as soon as you tip it over. And she walks over and she takes a big, deep breath in front of this hourglass, in front of this empty metal basket. She looks down at the river and she like starts to mentally prepare herself to go seek out stones that will represent every hardship that she will face. And then she turns the hourglass over and she sprints down to the river. Last 60 seconds here on this first side. Remember that you're trying to relax, to give space here, to be at ease into the offering of space here. And when it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees back to neutral. You can let the left arm just relax to whatever feels best. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. And notice if there is some asymmetry in the torso regulation. So do we have more openness on the left side? Is there more space on the left side? And how do we compensate so that the weight distribution of the torso becomes more balanced? Uh, Sometimes just where we position the arms can help that weight distribution, but try to find a balanced landing spot for your torso weight here. We're not going to be here for a super long time on this external hip rotation, so try to be at as as much ease as you can offer the external rotation. Last 30 seconds here. It's midpoint. When it feels appropriate for you, when you feel ready, let's bring our knees back to neutral. And then we'll let the knees fall over to the second side, the left side, and let your right arm bend 90 degrees at the elbow, fingertips towards the ceiling. Then let the palm come down towards the floor. Once again, note that you have that blanket that can offer some support for the internal rotation. Most of us are not ambidextrous, so we'll have a dominant side, and one side or the other will likely be more restricted than the other. So just pay attention to that possibility. And granted, if it can benefit from propping. And then left arm again can be at cactus, it can be out towards T, or it can be down by your side, whatever feels most natural and beneficial for you. Think about how you can soften, how you can give space here, how each cycle of breath is this opportunity to expand through ease. So she starts at the edge of the river and she reaches in and she pulls out this stone that's probably about the size of her palm. and it's almost perfectly round. And it's been worn smooth by the river. She like holds the weight in her hand. And she's almost immediately hit with like, oh, this is like a bike tire, and I'm for sure going to have a bike tire problem in the future. She puts that in her pocket. She reaches down into the water, and this time she really experiences the frigidness of the water. She pulls out another stone. And again, as she pulls the stone out, she's hit with like this obvious future problem that she will experience in her life. And again, it's maybe just a little bit bigger than the size of her palm. Last 15 seconds here. And then she gets her pockets full. She runs back up and she empties her pockets into this metal basket. When it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees back to neutral. We'll let the right arm relax, let the palms face up on both hands, let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide once again. We again will not be here for a super long time. We want the shoulder girdles to relax. See if you have a little bit more bilateral balance in the torso. Is the weight distribution a little bit more even or easily even this time? Make sure that the hip girdle is balanced and just relax in. And so she continues to repeat this process, running down to the river and finding stones that, as she grabs them, almost immediately have a connection to a future hardship she's going to experience. And it's almost like there's some type of a divine intervention happening as she connects to these stones. She's just hit with this will represent this, this will represent this, this will represent this. And she keeps carrying them up to this metal basket sitting on this table. Each time she goes up, she looks at the hourglass, and the sand is consistently ticking away. Give ourselves just another 60 seconds here. Last 60 seconds of this external hip rotation. Last 5 seconds here. Just any last release, relaxation, ease. And then when it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees back into a bent shape so the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling. If you do have a ball handy, let's grab that and grab one of our blankets. And we're just going to place the ball inside a little taco for a cervical spine adjustment. That's going to come behind us. If you don't have a ball, you can just roll a blanket. Just want a nice little cervical spine adjustment. And then we're going to heel toe the feet out to the width of the mat and let the knees fall in towards one another. This is particularly impactful of the cervical spine as we ground and anchor neutral lumbar spine. We really can emphasize the arch, the extension energy of the cervical spine. So be maybe additionally extra aware, supernaturally aware of how the ball and the cervical spine are interplaying and where you position that at those three positions: base of the cervical spine, midpoint, apex of the arch, or base of the skull. And then really try to relax the hips so that they continue to anchor and so that the pelvic bowl itself can splay out into this space. Arms can be anywhere, but let's see if it's possible to go palms up so we can counteract those long internal rotation holds that we offered. And then just be at ease here. As the trips continue to add up, the stones in this metal basket continue to pile up. And almost with a direct inverse correlation, as the sand in the hourglass goes down, the stones in the basket fill up. Until she recognizes that this is going to be her last trip to the river. The hourglass is nearly empty. And she still knows she needs to lift this basket before the hourglass runs out. And so she runs down to the river and she grabs as many stones as she can. And each time she grabs a stone, it's immediately correlated to a challenge in her life that she expects to have in the future. And then she sprints back up and she dumps the last stones into this basket. And she looks over at the hourglass and there's probably a couple minutes left, and she just makes the determination she's going to relax her breath, she's going to calm down before she lifts this thing. So she just does some work regulating her respiration. And then when there's maybe 30 seconds worth of sand in the hourglass, she reaches for the handle of this on this basket. When it feels appropriate for you, let's take our knees back out to the width of the heels and then heel toe the feet back into width of the hips. And then we can pull that blanket prop out from underneath our neck. Let our head come down and just ask yourself if there's anything that you might want, that you might need, that you might benefit from prior to Shavasana. If there is, let's offer that to ourselves now. If you have everything you need, if you're ready for some stillness, let's relax ourselves into a shape where we can appreciate our stillness. Give yourself the opportunity to once again settle into a cycle of respiration that is giving, of space, of ease, of softness. And so her hands reach out for this basket, the handle of this basket. And with all her strength, she starts to pull. Fully, deeply, and completely at ease here. So she pulls with every bit of might in her body. And this basket doesn't move at all. And she looks over at the hourglass, and there's maybe 15 seconds left, and she pulls and she pulls and she pulls, but she can't even get it to slide on this table. And she looks over at this old guru, and he's looking back at her. And then the last trickle of sand leaves the hourglass. And she slumps down, and he slowly walks over to her and puts his hand on her shoulder. We'll start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes. Let that movement expand up into our wrists and our ankles, our elbows and our knees. Shoulders and hips. Feel all of that space through the torso, through the neck, through the head, through the jaw. Eventually, we'll allow our body to transition from the shape we're in back into a seat. And in this seated space, let the spine get tall, breath get fluid, eyes close. This old man puts his hand on her shoulder. She says, I'm sorry, I couldn't lift it. I guess I won't be able to deal with everything in my life. And he just kicks the leg on this table. The table comes crashing down, and the basket spills out onto the ground. He reaches down and he picks up this stone. It's perfectly round, about the size of his palm, and he places it in her hand, and he says, what about this? Can you lift this? She takes it and she says, of course, this is very light. And he says, well, life only happens one moment at a time. So that's all you need. With our next inhale, let's bring our hands together. Now, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that the beautifulness of life, that it can only happen one moment at a time? And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Love the heck out of you. Have a beautiful rest of your day. If I see you tomorrow, we'll be in for a little movement. If I see you next week, have a beautiful week. See you soon.